You are 60 years old. Let us dispense with the pleasantries and the comforting lies that the financial media industry, that massive, writhing tapeworm attached to the economy, loves to feed you. You do not have plenty of time. You are not in the prime of your accumulation phase. You are standing on the precipice of biological obsolescence. And if your balance sheet is a mess today, you are in grave danger of living out your final decades in a state of undignified squalor. The most asinine delusion plaguing your generation is the belief that you can catch up. I see men and women who spent 40 years spending every dime they earned on depreciating assets and lifestyle signaling, suddenly waking up at 60 with a panic in their eyes, thinking they can miracle their way to solvency by gambling on the stock market. They treat the New York Stock Exchange like a casino because they wasted 4 decades treating their bank accounts like a limitless trough. This is not just folly, it is a tragedy of the highest order. You cannot defy the laws of compounding interest just because you suddenly realized you are mortal. If you are 60 and broke, or 60 and mediocre, the market does not owe you a bonanza to make up for your past lethargy. The modern world encourages this madness. It tells you that 60 is the new 40, which is biologically false and financially ruinous. The investment banks and the peddlers of retirement dreams want you to believe that with a few clever option trades or a bet on some digital rat poison like cryptocurrency, you can compress 40 years of disciplined saving into 4 years of speculation. This is absolute insanity. It is the financial equivalent of trying to cure lung cancer by smoking faster. When I look back at the way the world worked when I was young, or how the great industrial titans operated, the contrast is stark enough to make you vomit. Look at John D. Rockefeller, or Andrew Carnegie, or even the way we ran blue chip stamps in the early days. There was no assumption of easy money. There was no expectation that the Federal Reserve would print $1 trillion to bail out your bad decisions. We operated with a fortress balance sheet. We assumed the world was a harsh, unforgiving place, because it is. The modern fool at 60 looks at his inadequate savings and thinks, I need high returns. The wise man looks at his pile, however small, and thinks, I must not lose this. The difference in temperament is the difference between dying with dignity and dying in a state of panic. Recall a specific meeting at the Daily Journal Corporation some years ago where we discussed the sheer lunacy of the wealth effect. People feel rich because their house, which they do not own because the bank does, went up in value on paper. So they borrow against it to buy things they do not need. If you are over 60, this behavior is not just stupid, it is suicidal. You must understand that the game has changed for you. In your 20s, you had human capital, your ability to earn wages for decades. That was your bond portfolio. Now, that bond is maturing. It is ceasing to pay coupons. You are losing your ability to earn, just as the ravages of inflation are attacking your purchasing power. To react to this by taking on risk is to invite the Lollapalooza effect of disaster into your life. You are inviting a confluence of bad events, a market crash, a health crisis, and a margin call to hit you all at once. And unlike a 30-year-old, you cannot simply work your way out. You are tired. You are old. You must face this reality with brutal rationality. To navigate this minefield, you must use the most powerful mental model in my arsenal, inversion. The mathematician Carl Jacobi said, invert, always invert. He knew that many hard problems are best solved backwards. Instead of asking, how do I get rich at 60? Which is a question that leads to speculative bubbles and fraud, you must ask, what will ensure I die miserable, broke, and dependent on the charity of others? This is a much easier question to answer, and once you have the list of miseries, you simply avoid them at all costs. What destroys a 60-year-old? Leverage. Envy. Supporting adult children who refuse to work. Chasing yield. Listening to a broker who gets paid whether you win or lose. If you systematically eliminate these stupidities, you are left with a result that, while perhaps not making you the next Rockefeller, will keep you out of the poorhouse. It is remarkable how much long-term advantage people like us have gotten by trying to be consistently not stupid, instead of trying to be very intelligent. There must be some wisdom in the folk saying, "It's the strong swimmers who drown." The 60-year-old who thinks he is a financial wizard is the one who loses everything. The one who knows he is slow, old, and vulnerable is the one who survives. I will tell you a story about my own stupidity to illustrate the dangers of ignoring these principles, specifically regarding leverage and impatience. It was 1962. I was a younger man then, obviously, but I was already wealthy by normal standards. I saw an opportunity in a certain British Columbia power play, a utility situation that looked like a sure thing. It was a bonanza waiting to be plucked. I was so confident in my analysis, so sure of my own brilliance, that I borrowed heavily to buy into it, used leverage. I violated the cardinal rule. I put about 100,000 of borrowed money, which was a fortune in 1962, equivalent to nearly $1 million today, into this trade. And then the government changed the rules. The market moved against me. It wasn't that my fundamental analysis of the business was wrong. It was that my timeline was interrupted by external forces I could not control. I had to meet a margin call. I lost the entire 100,000, gone, vaporized, because I was in a hurry, because I used debt. If I had simply bought the shares with cash and sat on my ass, I would have eventually made a fortune. But leverage introduces path dependence. It means that even if you are right in the long run, you can be wiped out in the short run. I was smart, but I was also stupid. I survived because I was young enough to earn it back. You at 60 do not have that luxury. If you lose a 100 Zalozen now because you were trying to be clever with leverage, that is 5 years of retirement life you have incinerated. You cannot afford to be me in 1962. Let us look deeper into the avoidance side of inversion. What is the single greatest destroyer of wealth for the elderly? It is not a stock market crash. It is the slow, grinding erosion of inflation coupled with the desperate reach for yield. You see your savings earning 4%, while inflation is running at 5%, and you feel you are falling behind, so you reach. You buy junk bonds. You buy complex derivatives sold to you by a smiling man in a nice suit who calls himself a wealth manager, but is actually a glorified salesman of financial sewage. You must avoid these people like the plague. I am not your advisor, but if I were, I would tell you to consider the possibility that your standard of living must decrease to match your reality, rather than risking your survival to maintain a facade. It is better to live in a smaller house and eat simpler food than to bet the farm on a venture capital deal that goes to zero. The standard doctrine I have preached at Berkshire Hathaway for decades applies tenfold to you now. We have 3 baskets for investing: yes, no, too hard. At 60, almost everything should be in the too hard pile. If you cannot understand the balance sheet in 10 minutes, it is rat poison. Stay away. The other side of inversion is avoiding the psychological trap of envy. Envy is the only one of the deadly sins that is no fun at all. Gluttony is fun for a while. Lust is fun. Envy is just pure pain. And yet, the 60-year-old is uniquely susceptible to it. You look at your friend who bought NVIDIA at the right time, or your neighbor who flipped a house for a double, and you feel a burning desire to match them. This is how you die broke. You must invert the situation. Instead of looking at what they have, look at the risks they took. Understand that for every winner in the high risk lottery, there are 10 corpses floating in the river. You do not see the losers because they are not bragging at the country club. They are hiding in shame. Do not base your financial strategy on the survivorship bias of lucky fools. I have seen more mediocrities rise to the top due to luck, only to crash back down when the tide goes out than I care to count. As Warren and I have always said, when the tide goes out, you find out who is swimming naked. At 60, you cannot afford to be caught naked. You must also invert your relationship with your family. This is harsh, but necessary. I have seen many fortunes dissipated by well-meaning parents bailing out incompetent children. If your child is 40 years old and needs your money to pay their rent, you are not helping them. You are enabling a dependency that will drain you dry. Invert the problem. How do I ensure my children remain incompetent and my own retirement is ruined? Answered, give them money every time they fail. Therefore, to avoid this, you must close the bank of mom and dad. It is brutal. It feels cold. But rationality often feels cold to those who are addicted to emotion. You have a duty to yourself first. If you become destitute, you become a burden on them. The greatest gift you can give your children is your own financial independence so that you never have to live in their guest room. Finally, consider the avoidance of complexity. The financial industry thrives on complexity because complexity allows them to hide fees. They invent products with names like reverse convertible notettes or buffered index annuities. These are Lollapaloozas of fee extraction. They are designed to confuse you. Invert the sales pitch. Why is this person trying so hard to sell me this? Because the commission is huge. If it were such a great investment, they would keep it for themselves. At Berkshire, we keep things simple. We buy good businesses. We hold them. We sit on our ass. We do not use exotic derivatives to hedge our bets because we do not make bets that require hedging. At 60, your portfolio should be so simple that you could explain it to a fifth grader. If it requires a spreadsheet with macros to understand your exposure, you are doing it wrong. Complexity is the enemy of the elderly investor. It masks risk. It hides leverage. It is a fog in which the thieves operate. Clear the fog. Hold cash. Hold simple index funds if you must, or great companies you understand. Avoid the rest. In summary of this inversion process, you are not trying to win the Olympics. You are trying not to die on the mountain. These are two very different objectives requiring two very different mindsets. The climber trying to summit Everest in record time takes risks that the climber trying to simply get back to base camp alive would never consider. You are on the descent. The summit is behind you. Your goal is base camp. Your goal is safety. Do not let the ego of your past self dictate the actions of your present self. That young man who could take a punch is gone. You are the elder now. Act like it. Be ruthless in your avoidance of folly. Be vicious in your rejection of easy money. And for the love of God, stop looking at what your neighbors are doing. They are likely drowning in debt and smiling through the pain. Let them drown. You stay on the boat. Let us now turn our gaze to the most terrifying line item on your personal balance sheet, one that cannot be hedged, leveraged, or renegotiated. If you are over 60, you are dealing with a rapidly depreciating asset that is hurtling toward zero value with absolute mathematical certainty. The young can afford to waste a decade wandering in the wilderness of stupidity. They have the time to compound their way out of a zero balance start. You do not. If you look at the actuarial tables, which you should, because ignoring them is a form of childish denial, you will see that the number of quality years you have remaining is shockingly low. I am not talking about the years where you are drooling in a nursing home, kept alive by machines and the pharmaceutical industry's desire for profit. I am talking about the years where you have the cognitive and physical capacity to enjoy the fruits of your labor. That number is likely less than 15, perhaps 10, every time you say yes to a mediocre investment, a draining relationship, or a foolish activity. You are burning a percentage of your remaining life that is statistically significant. This brings us to the iron law of the universe that most people ignore until they are on their deathbed's opportunity cost. In economics, we teach that everything has a cost, not just in dollars, but in what you had to give up to get it. For the 60-year-old, the algebra of opportunity cost is ruthless. When you are 20, the opportunity cost of watching television for 3 hours is negligible. When you are 60, the opportunity cost of that same 3 hours is a slice of your dwindling consciousness that you will never retrieve. You must view your investment decisions through this lens. If you park your capital in a stagnant asset because you are too lazy to read a balance sheet or too frightened to make a rational decision, you are not just earning 0%, you are paying a massive penalty in lost opportunities. The S&P 500 might be compounding at 8% or 10%, and by sitting in a checking account earning 0.1% because you are paralyzed by fear, you are effectively lighting your future purchasing power on fire. This is asinine. You must demand a return on your capital that justifies the time you have left. This does not mean chasing risk. We covered that folly in the previous block. It means you must be ferociously selective. The strategy you must adopt is what I call waiting for the fat pitch. In baseball, a batter has a strike zone. If he swings at a ball that is 2 inches outside the zone, his batting average plummets. But unlike baseball, in the game of investing, there is no umpire called strikes. You can stand at the plate with the bat on your shoulder for days, months, or even years. The market can throw you GM at 4D, crypto scams, overpriced tech stocks, and dubious real estate deals. You can stand there and do absolutely nothing. And you do not strike out. You only strike out if you swing and miss. This is the hardest discipline for the human animal to master, especially the aging human animal who feels the pressure of time. You feel the urge to do something. This urge is a genetic defect. The desire to act is often the enemy of the desire to profit. You must wait for the pitch that is slow, straight, and right down the middle, a wonderful business at a fair price, or a mispriced asset where the odds are heavily in your favor. When that pitch comes, you must swing with everything you have. But here is where the tragedy lies. Most people spend their 60s swinging at bad pitches because they are bored. They buy a vacation home they will use twice a year because they want a project. They invest in their nephew's doomed restaurant because they want to feel benevolent. These are not investments. They are consumption masquerading as capital allocation. You are taking the precious, finite capital you have accumulated, which represents the stored energy of your past labor, and you are dissipating it on low probability bets. I'm not your advisor, but if I were, I would tell you to consider sitting on your ass. Sitting on your ass is a legitimate investment strategy. It is often the most profitable one. If you cannot find an opportunity that screams, buy me, because the math is so obviously in your favor, then the correct move is to stay in cash or short-term treasuries and wait. The world is full of foolish gamblers. Eventually, they will panic. Eventually, asset prices will dislocate. And because you sat on your ass and kept your powder dry, you will be the only one with the liquidity to buy the fat pitch when it finally arrives. I must confess a personal failure to illustrate this point. A mistake that haunts me, not because I lost money, because I failed to make as much as I should have. It was a sin of omission, which is often far costlier than a sin of commission. The year was 1979. The subject was Belridge Oil. This was a company in California that owned massive oil reserves. It was incredibly undervalued. The math was simple. The oil in the ground was worth far more than the price of the stock. It was a classic value play, a real Lollapalooza of an opportunity. I bought some shares. I bought 300 shares for my family. It was a decent amount of money, but it was not aggressive. I was trying to buy more, but the price ticked up slightly. I became penny wise and pound foolish. I wanted a bargain on a stock that was already a steal. I stopped buying. I let a minor price fluctuation deter me from backing up the truck. Shortly thereafter, Shell Oil came in and bought the entire company for a massive premium. My 300 shares turned into a small fortune. But if I had simply not been so cheap, if I had recognized the magnitude of the fat pitch and swung with full force, I would have bought 3,000 shares or 30,000 shares. I left millions of dollars on the table in 1979 money, which would be hundreds of millions today. Because I was sucking my thumb instead of seizing the opportunity. I was right on the analysis. I was right on the valuation. I was dead wrong on the intensity of action. At 60, you cannot afford a Belleridge oil mistake. If you identify a situation where the risk is low and the upside is adequate, a situation that protects your principal while offering a return, you cannot nibble. You cannot say, I'll put a little bit in and see what happens. That is how you stay mediocre. When the odds are overwhelmingly in your favor, you must bet heavily. This contradicts the diversification nonsense sold by wealth managers who want you to own 500 different stocks so they can charge you fees on all of them. Diversification is protection against ignorance. If you know what you are doing, or if you have found a simple, obvious truth, diversification is madness. The lesson of Belleridge is intimately tied to the decay of your time. I had 40 years to make up for that mistake. Could go on to find other deals like See's Candies or the Washington Post and let the compounding wash away my error. You do not have 40 years. If you find a fat pitch today, it might be the last one you see. The market does not offer Lollapalooza opportunities every Tuesday. They come along once or twice a decade, usually during a panic, a recession, or a liquidity crisis. We are likely heading into such times now, given the insane amount of money printing and debt in the system. The world is preparing to throw you a fat pitch. But if you are fully invested in overvalued garbage because you couldn't wait, or if you are too timid to swing when the ball is over the plate, you will miss the only chance you have to secure your final years. You must strip away the noise. The financial news cycle is designed to trigger your dopamine receptors, making you feel that you are missing out if you are not trading every day. Invert that. The news is noise. The signal is rare. Your job at 60 is to be a sniper, not a machine gunner. A machine gunner sprays bullets everywhere and hits nothing of value. A sniper waits for days, lying in the mud motionless, waiting for the perfect shot. One shot, one kill. That is how you must treat your capital. Every dollar you spend or invest is a bullet. You have a limited supply. Do not fire them into the air to celebrate a bull market. Save them for the moment when the target is clear and stationary. Let us discuss the waiting part again, because it is where you will likely fail. Pascal said, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. This is doubly true for investors. You will feel an itch. You will see your neighbor making money on some idiotic trend. You will feel the envy we discussed earlier, and you will want to act. You must crush this impulse. You must develop the temperament of a granite statue. The algebra of opportunity demands it. If you hold cash earning 5%, which is currently possible, unlike the zero interest madness of the past decade, you are in a position of power. You are earning a return while retaining optionality. Optionality is the most valuable thing a 60-year-old can own. It means you are not forced to sell assets in a downturn to pay for your hip surgery. It means you can swoop in and buy cheap assets when the young, over-leveraged fools are getting margin called. Do not confuse waiting with sleeping. You must be awake. You must be reading. I read hundreds of annual reports. I read history. I read biographies. I am constantly looking for the anomaly, the mispricing, the thing that doesn't make sense. You should be doing the same. If you are retired, you have no excuse. You have the time to read. Instead of watching cable news, read the annual report of the companies you own. Read the proxy statements. Understand the business. If you do this, you will spot the fat pitch before the crowd does. The crowd relies on headlines. You must rely on data. When you understand the business better than the market does, and the market offers you a price that is essentially a gift, you buy. You buy aggressively, and then you go back to waiting. This cycle, wait, swing hard, wait, is the only rational way to approach the end game of wealth accumulation. It minimizes the number of decisions you have to make, which is good, because decision fatigue is real. It minimizes transaction costs and taxes, which are the termites eating your foundation. And most importantly, it aligns with the reality of your timeline. You do not need to get rich 20 times. You only need to get rich once. If you are already rich, you only need to stay rich. The fat pitch philosophy covers both. It prevents you from losing money on bad swings, and it ensures that when you do swing, it counts. Do not be me in 1979. Do not let a few pennies stand in the way of a fortune. But more importantly, do not be the fool who swings at everything and retires with nothing but a collection of strike-out tickets and a story about how the market was rigged against him. The market is not rigged. It is just ruthless in punishing impatience. Be the one who punishes the market with your patience. We have arrived at the final fortress of your sanity, your circle of competence. Confucius said that real knowledge is to know the extent of one's ignorance. Aristotle said something similar. It is an ancient truth because it is the only thing that separates the wise from the dead. At 60, you must ruthlessly define what you know, and more importantly, what you do not know. The financial world is a vast, complex adaptive system filled with things you do not understand. You do not understand biotechnology. You do not understand the inner workings of the blockchain. You probably do not even understand the balance sheet of the bank where you keep your checking account. That is fine. Do not understand how to build a rocket ship, so I do not try to build rocket ships. The disaster strikes when you step outside the small circle of things you actually understand because some charismatic charlatan on television told you it was a sure thing. You must learn to distinguish between real knowledge and what I call Shafir knowledge. There is a story I love to tell about Max knowledge. The Nobel Prize winning physicist. After he won the prize, he went around Germany giving the same speech about quantum mechanics. Over and over again, he delivered this lecture. His chauffeur, who drove him to every engagement, eventually memorized the speech. One day, the chauffeur said, "Professor Planck, it must be boring to give the same speech every time. I know it by heart. Why don't I go up on stage and give the speech in Munich, and you sit in the front row wearing my chauffeur's cap?" Planck liked the joke, so they did it. The chauffeur went up and delivered a flawless lecture on quantum mechanics. He used all the right words. He had the cadence, the jargon, and the confidence. Then, a physics professor in the audience stood up and asked a devastatingly complex question. The chauffeur didn't miss a beat. He looked at the professor and said, "I am surprised to hear such an elementary question in an advanced city like Munich. It is so simple that I will let my chauffeur answer it." The world is full of chauffeurs. The financial news channels are staffed almost entirely by chauffeurs. They have good hair, deep voices, and they know all the words. They say BITDA, quantitative easing, and stochastic oscillators with perfect pronunciation. But they do not know anything. They are actors reading a script written by advertisers. They possess chauffeur knowledge. They can describe the thing, but they cannot explain the thing. If you press them on why a stock is moving, they will give you a narrative that sounds plausible but has zero predictive power. The market is down because of fears over interest rates. Is it? Or is it down because of random variance? They don't know. But they have to say something to fill the airtime between the commercials for erectile dysfunction pills. If you are over 60 and you are making investment decisions based on what a talking head says on CNBC, you are letting the chauffeur drive the bus off a cliff. You must ignore them. Turn off the television. It is not information. It is noise designed to trigger your amygdala and make you trade. This brings us to the issue of trust and incentives. Whose bread I eat, his song I sing. You must analyze the incentives of everyone who offers you advice. The broker wants you to trade because he gets a commission. The fund manager wants you to buy his fund because he gets a management fee. The financial advisor wants you to stay invested in complex instruments because it justifies his 1% annual levy on your wealth. None of these people get paid if you simply buy a low-cost index fund and sit on your hands for 20 years. Therefore, they will never tell you to do that. They will invent complexity to justify their existence. At your age, you must become a cynic. You must assume that everyone trying to sell you something is trying to pick your pocket, because usually they are. The only person you can trust is yourself, provided you have done the work to stay within your circle of competence. If you haven't done the work, you cannot even trust yourself. Now, let us distill the remaining years of your life into a framework that is simple, brutal, and effective. You do not need 100 rules. You need a few iron laws that you refuse to break. When I look at the people who have successfully navigated old age without financial ruin, they all adhered to the 3 decisions. These are not suggestions. They are the walls of your fortress. First, live below your means. This is the primary defense against the unknown, for if you spend everything you earn, you are a slave to the unexpected, and at 60, the unexpected is usually expensive. Second, never interrupt compounding. This is the engine of your security, meaning you do not sell your good assets out of fear during a panic, nor do you raid your capital to buy a boat. For every dollar you remove from the compounding machine is a soldier you have executed before the battle is won. Third, remove toxic people. This is the guardian of your sanity, because unreliable, envious, or greedy family members and friends will drain your wallet and your spirit faster than any bear market, and you no longer have the time to fix them or the energy to endure them. If you can make these 3 decisions and stick to them with the fanaticism of a religious zealot, you will be fine. If you compromise on even one, you are inviting the Lollapalooza of ruin. Let me expand on the 3rd point, because it is the one people struggle with the most. Remove toxic people. It sounds harsh. It sounds unchristian. I do not care. You are in the preservation phase of your life. You cannot afford to have a brother-in-law who is always pitching you a can't-miss real estate deal. You cannot afford a child who uses emotional blackmail to extract your retirement savings. You must build a moat around your life. In business, we look for companies with economic moats, protection against competitors. In life, you need a psychological moat, protection against idiots. I've known many brilliant men who were ruined because they could not say no to a toxic person in their inner circle. They let the vampire in, and the vampire drank them dry. You must be the ruthless elder sage of your own family. You must be the one who says, no explanation needed, just no. It is a complete sentence. The beauty of staying within your circle of competence is that it removes the anxiety of the unknown. If you stick to what you know, you don't have to worry about what the Federal Reserve is doing, or what the price of Bitcoin is, or who is winning the election in Italy. None of that matters. You own a farm. The farm produces corn. People need corn. You get a check. That is a business you can understand. Or you own a piece of American business through a low-cost index fund. American business in aggregate makes money. You get a piece of that money. Simple. The moment you step into the too hard pile, you are gambling. And if you are gambling at 60 with money you cannot afford to lose, you are not an investor, you are a degenerate. I want to address a specific comment from our last session. Viewer, retired teacher 47 wrote to me and said, "You old bat, you tell us to hold cash and wait for opportunities. But with inflation at 6%, cash is trash. I'm losing purchasing power every day I wait." Retired teacher 47, you are right. Mathematically, you are absolutely correct. Holding cash in an inflationary environment is painful. It feels like bleeding. But let me refine your thinking, because you are missing the forest for the trees. You are viewing cash as an investment. Cash is not an investment. Cash is an option. It is a call option on every asset class In the world with no expiration date and no strike price, you pay a premium for holding that option, and that premium is inflation. That is the cost of doing business. If you are fully invested in garbage because you are afraid of losing 6% to inflation, you are liable to lose 50% to a market correction. I would rather bleed 6% a year waiting for a sure thing than lose 50% in a week chasing a fantasy. You pay the inflation tax to buy the right to strike when the iron is hot. Stop whining about the cost of the option and focus on the value of the strike. We have covered a lot of ground. We have discussed the folly of catching up, the idiocy of leverage, the necessity of inversion, and the discipline of the fat pitch. But knowledge without action is just dinner party conversation. It is useless. You are likely sitting there, nodding your head, thinking, yes, this old man makes sense. And then you will close this window and go back to your bad habits. You will keep that losing position in that speculative tech stock because you hope it comes back. Hope is not a strategy. Hope is for people who play the lottery. Rationality is for people who want to get rich. I am going to give you a test. It is a test of your will. It is a test to see if you have the stomach to actually apply the Munger operating system to your life, or if you are just another tourist in the land of wisdom. You have a position in your portfolio right now that you know is garbage. You know it. It's that SPX you bought in 2021. It's that crypto coin with the dog on it. It's that legacy airline stock that hasn't made a profit in a decade. You are holding it because you don't want to realize the loss. You are holding it because your ego can't admit you were wrong. I am not your advisor. But if I were, I would tell you to cut the cancer out before it spreads. You need to act. You need to prove to yourself that you are capable of rationality over emotion. Open your brokerage app. Right now, find that one position that, deep in your gut is rat poison. The one that violates the circle of competence. The one you bought because of a chauffeur on TV. Sell it. Sell the whole thing. Take the loss. Realize the pain. And then breathe the fresh air of rationality. Once you have done this, I want you to leave a comment below. Just one word. Done. I will reply to the first 50 of you who have the courage to execute. Do not tell me a story. Do not give me excuses. Just do it. The market does not care about your feelings, and neither do I. But I respect action. Be the person who acts.